Everyone is reporting that Jennifer Siebel Newsom snapped at reporters. That is the headline you have been seeing everywhere. That is the clip that has been flying around social media. That is the take that every major outlet ran with inside of 24 hours. And look, I get it. It is a compelling clip. It is a dramatic moment. It has everything the algorithm loves. But here is what almost nobody is actually asking. And this is the part that should bother you. Why were those specific questions being asked in the first place? What were reporters actually trying to get the governor to answer that day? Because here is the uncomfortable truth that is getting buried underneath all the noise. The questions that triggered this moment were not random. They were not off-topic nonsense. They were pointed, specific questions about public money, about accountability, and about people in Gavin Newsom's inner circle. So before you decide who was out of line in that room, you owe it to yourself to see the full picture. And that is exactly what we are going to do today. And real quick, if you are tired of clicking on videos that give you 30 seconds of actual information wrapped in 10 minutes of opinion, dramatic music, and people telling you what to think, this channel is different. We do not do that here. We give you the facts, the context, the questions worth asking, and then we let you make up your own mind. That is the deal. If that sounds like something you need in your life, hit subscribe right now before we go any further. It takes 2 seconds and it means you will actually see these videos when they come out instead of stumbling across them 3 weeks later. Okay, we are done with that. Let's get into it. Here is what you need to understand before we talk about that moment at the microphone. February 11th, 2026, Sacramento, California. Governor Gavin Newsom called a press conference to sign a piece of legislation, a bill that directed $90 million in emergency grant funding to Planned Parenthood and affiliated women's health providers across the state. Now, in terms of what the bill was designed to do, the answer is straightforward. California's leaders have been watching what is happening at the federal level with concern, particularly when it comes to funding for reproductive health services. This bill was the state saying, if federal money gets cut or pulled back, we are going to backstop these clinics with state dollars, $90 million worth of backstop. That is not a small number. That is a serious financial commitment. And the bill had already moved through the California state legislature before arriving at that signing event. So this was not a proposal, it was done. Signed, sealed, and funded. Jennifer Siebel Newsom was there. She holds the title of First Partner, and that is the official title California gives to the spouse of the governor. And she has been an active part of this administration on issues related to women and families. Representatives from Planned Parenthood were in the room. The cameras were set up. The podium was ready. And by every measure, this should have been a positive news cycle for the Newsom administration. A big check, a clear message, a good visual, and then the reporters started asking questions. Now here is where it gets interesting. And this is the part of the story that almost every outlet glossed over in about one sentence before jumping straight to the clip. The reporters in that room were not asking about the $90 million. They were not asking about Planned Parenthood. They were not asking about women's health care access in California. According to multiple accounts of what happened that day, the questions being directed at Governor Newsom covered 3 very different topics.
Because you don't seem to care.
That was California's First Partner and Governor Gavin Newsom's wife, Jennifer Siebel Newsom, scolding journalists for not asking the questions that she was hoping to hear. I'm right outside of the press conference room where this happened. I was sitting about 20 feet away from her when she said that. This was at a bill signing where Governor Gavin Newsom was signing off on $90 million in state grants for Planned Parenthood. It comes after federal funding cuts and as some clinics have had to close in California. Now, a setting like this is one of the few opportunities where the California Capitol Press Corps gets the opportunity to ask Governor Newsom questions. So oftentimes in settings like this, they are off topic. That was the case today. My questions, for example, were around the high-speed rail. Others were around Casey Wasserman, the governor going to Munich, and other topics. And then suddenly, that's when the First Partner stepped up to the podium. I should note that most of the journalists in this room were women, from the Associated Press, television, to the New York Times. A lot of them represented by women. I'm going to play the whole clip in full, but After she said this, journalists continued to ask off-topic questions. This is not abnormal. This happens across the country. This happens especially in Washington, D.C. Journalists have a right to ask what they want. Here's what she said.
No, we just find it incredulous that we have Planned Parenthood here, and women are 51% of the population. And the majority of the questions, all of these questions, have really been about other issues. So it's just fascinating. You have this incredible women's caucus and all these allies, and you're not asking about it. And this happens over and over and over and over again. You wonder why we have such a horrific war on women in this country, and that these guys are getting away with it, because you don't seem to care. So I just offer that with love. You have incredible women in this room, and you have these allies. Ask about what we're here for today, don't you think?
Topic 1, California's high-speed rail project. Topic 2, a controversy involving a Newsom associate with a connection to the Jeffrey Epstein inquiry. Sage with reported ties to the Los Angeles 2028 Olympics. And topic 3, other general state accountability issues. Those were the questions in the room. That was the air in the room. And if you have been following California politics for more than about 5 minutes, none of those questions should surprise you. Let me take a minute on the high-speed rail piece because this matters. California voters approved a high-speed rail project years ago with a cost estimate that at the time felt ambitious but manageable. And over the years, that number has ballooned. It has ballooned in a way that has made California a cautionary tale for large infrastructure projects across the entire country. Reporters in Sacramento have been pressing state leadership on the cost overruns, on the timeline, and on the transparency of the contracting process for a long time. This is not a new story. It is an ongoing active accountability story that has not been fully answered. So of course reporters were asking about it. That is their job. And on the Epstein connection, any question that links a sitting governor's associates to one of the most widely covered scandals in recent American history is going to get asked. That is just the reality of political journalism. You have access to the governor. You ask the question on the record. That is how it works. Whether the connection is direct or indirect, strong or tenuous, the question gets asked because the public deserves an answer, or at minimum, a denial on the record. That is not sensationalism. That is accountability journalism. So picture the room. You have got a press conference organized around a women's health bill. You have got Planned Parenthood leadership in attendance. You have got Jennifer Siebel Newsom at the podium and the reporters in the room. And here is the detail that adds a significant layer of complexity to this whole story. The majority of the reporters asking those questions were women journalists, asking questions about high-speed rail and about financial accountability and about a governor's associates. And then Jennifer Siebel Newsom stepped forward and she had things to say. Here is what she said according to reports confirmed by multiple outlets. And I want you to actually hear these words and sit with them for a second, because the way they land says a lot about what was really happening in that room. We have Planned Parenthood here, and women are 51% of the population, and the majority of the questions have really been about other issues. And then she went further. She did not stop there. You wonder why we have such a horrific war on women in this country, because you don't seem to care. She said that to the reporters directly, in the room, on camera, and the press conference kept going after that. The reporters did not leave. They did not stop asking questions. They continued. But the clip of that moment, those two statements, that is what went everywhere. Now, I want to be fair here, because this is where a lot of coverage goes wrong by getting lazy in one direction or the other. Let's actually think about what she was saying and why a reasonable person could feel exactly the way she appeared to feel in that moment. Reproductive health policy is not an abstract issue right now. In the current political climate, it is live. It is contested, and it has real consequences for real people. California chose to respond to that climate by committing $90 million in state money to protect access to care. That is a significant policy action that, in a vacuum, would generate a lot of coverage. And instead, the room's attention was on a train and on a scandal. If you organized an event around a cause you believed in deeply, and you felt like the people with cameras and microphones simply did not care about that cause, that frustration is human. It is understandable. You do not have to agree with how she expressed it to understand where it came from, but here is the other side of this, and it is equally true. Press conferences are one of the very few structured opportunities that journalists have to get an elected official on record in real time. Reporters do not get to schedule a one-on-one interview with Gavin Newsom whenever they want. They get access when the administration creates access. And so when that access opens up, even at an event that is nominally about women's health funding, reporters are going to ask about what they are working on. They are going to ask the questions their editors want answered. They are going to ask the questions the public wants answered, and the questions about high-speed rail and about the Epstein connection are not tabloid questions. They are not gotcha questions designed to embarrass anyone. They are questions about how public money is being spent and who the governor surrounds himself with. Those questions deserve answers regardless of what bill is being signed that day. And then there is the layer that I mentioned a moment ago that I want to come back to because I think it is the most intellectually honest part of this whole story. The reporters asking those questions and the ones Siebel Newsom was calling out for not caring about women were mostly women themselves, women journalists doing their jobs, asking accountability questions, and being told that by doing so, they were contributing to a war on women. Think about what that actually means if you are one of those reporters, you are a woman, you are doing your job. You are asking questions that you believe are in the public interest, and you are being told from the podium that your line of questioning is evidence that you do not care about women. That is a complicated thing to sit with. And I think the public deserves to sit with that complexity instead of having the whole thing packaged as a simple villain and hero story, which is what most of the coverage gave us. Now let us zoom out for a moment and talk about the $90 million. Because here is the honest truth. The actual content of the bill got almost no serious coverage, and that is worth acknowledging. The legislation that was signed that day directs $90 million in emergency funding to women's health providers across California. That covers things like family planning services, pregnancy care, preventive screenings, and other reproductive health services that these clinics provide to people who often do not have other options. This is not money going to a large corporation. This is money going to clinics that serve communities, often lower income communities, often communities of color, that rely on these services because they cannot afford private care. That is what $90 million buys in this context. Access for people who would otherwise go without. And the political logic behind the timing of this bill is not complicated. California has been watching the federal government closely. The state's leadership has made a deliberate decision to position California as a refuge for reproductive health access. This $90 million bill is a piece of that positioning. It is both a policy action and a political statement. And it is worth knowing that California is operating with a significant budget deficit even as it makes commitments like this one. That does not make the bill wrong, but it does mean that decisions about where money goes have real trade-offs, and those trade-offs deserve scrutiny. That is not a partisan observation. That is just math. Now let us talk about what happened after the clip went viral, because this is where the story is actually still developing. Within hours of the press conference, the footage was circulating across every major platform. KCRA ran it. Fox News put it on Instagram, Reform California had it, Carl DeMaio's channel was on it, and here is what is interesting about how different audiences received the exact same clip. On one side, you had people saying this was an abuse of the press conference format, that Siebel Newsom was using her position to deflect from accountability questions the governor did not want to answer, that she was effectively using women's health as a shield. On the other side, you had people saying she was absolutely right, that the media consistently undercovers women's policy issues relative to their importance, and that someone finally said it out loud. And both of those reactions happened simultaneously, in real time, fueled by the exact same 30 seconds of footage. That is what virality looks like in the current media environment. The same clip means completely different things depending on who is watching it and what they already believe. And the danger of that, the real danger, is that most people never go back and look for the context. They see the clip, they form the reaction, and that reaction becomes the reality in their mind, which is exactly why you are watching a video that takes 9 minutes to actually explain what happened instead of 30 seconds to just show you the moment. As of February 17th, 2026, There has been no official follow-up statement from the governor's office and no direct response from Siebel Newsom addressing the moment specifically. The administration has not commented on whether this was a planned intervention or a spontaneous one, and that silence is, in its own way, telling. Because if the administration felt the moment was a mistake, you would typically expect a walkback or a clarifying statement. The fact that there has been none suggests that either they are comfortable with how it played or they are letting the noise die down before addressing it. Either way, watch that space. So here is where we land, and I want to give you the honest bottom line without spinning it in either direction. On February 11th, 2026, Governor Gavin Newsom signed a bill sending $90 million to Planned Parenthood and women's health clinics in California. That is real money for real services. At the press conference, reporters, most of them women, asked about high-speed rail cost overruns and a Newsom Associates reported connection to the Jeffrey Epstein inquiry. Those are legitimate accountability questions. Jennifer Siebel Newsom stepped forward and told those reporters that their line of questioning was evidence that they did not care about women, and that the country's lack of focus on women's issues amounted to a war on women. The clip went viral. The press conference continued. No official follow-up has been issued. That is the full sequence. That is everything that happened. And what you do with it, whether you think she was right, whether you think the reporters were right, whether you think the whole thing was staged or spontaneous, that is entirely up to you. My job is to make sure you have all of the pieces before you decide, because you cannot form an honest opinion about something you only half understand. That is true for this story, and it is true for everything else happening in California politics right now. Here is what I want you to watch for in the next 30 days, because this story is not finished. First, pay attention to how the Newsom administration structures its next major press event. If they start pre-screening questions, limiting media access, or controlling the format more tightly than usual, that will be a direct response to what happened in that room on February 11th. Administrations learn from these moments and they adjust. Watch for the adjustment. Second, the high-speed rail story. The reporters in that room were circling something. They were asking about it at a press conference that had nothing to do with it, which means they believe the story is significant enough to force the question wherever they can get access. Keep watching that story. It is not done. Third, watch Jennifer Siebel Newsom's presence at future events. If she becomes more visible, if she starts appearing regularly at policy announcements and taking a more active public role, then what happened on February 11th was not a one-time emotional reaction. It was a preview of a more prominent public role, and that changes the political calculus in ways that are worth paying attention to. California is a big, complicated state with a lot of money moving through it, a lot of political ambition at the top, and a press corps that is trying to hold all of it accountable while the media industry continues to shrink. The tension between those things, between the power of the people in office and the shrinking resources of the people tasked with covering them, is the real story underneath the clip, and it is a story that is going to keep producing moments like the one we saw on February 11th. Because when access is scarce and accountability is urgent, something is always going to give. That is just physics. If you found this useful, if you feel like you actually understand what happened now instead of just having an opinion about a clip you saw for 30 seconds, that is exactly what this channel is here to do. We are not trying to tell you what to think. We are trying to make sure you have what you need to think clearly. Subscribe if you want to keep getting that. Share this with someone who is talking about the clip without the context, and leave a comment below. I genuinely want to know. Do you think the reporters were out of line, or do you think Siebel Newsom crossed a line? There is no wrong answer. There is just the conversation worth having. We will see you in the next one.